The courtroom was full that
If we
morning.
proceed with this
The
motion,
air felt heavy,
There's
like
no
everyone
turning
was
back.
holding their breath. Elena Parker sat
Are
in
you
the front
certain?
row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across the room, her ex-husband, David Hale, leaned back in his chair with the same confident smirk she remembered from their marriage. He looked too relaxed, as if the outcome was already his. The notary stood near the judge's bench, holding a thick folder filled with papers, her father's will and trust documents. Elena's father, Richard Parker, had been a respected man, the owner of several hotels and properties. When he passed away, the estate was supposed to go to Elena and her younger brother, Noah. But now, everything was tangled up in confusion, all because of one man, David. 2 years ago, David had promised to help her manage her father's accounts after his death. He said he only wanted to make things easier. She believed him at first. But soon, documents started disappearing, emails went unanswered, and lawyers stopped returning her calls. When she tried to access the trust account, she was told there had been a change in guardianship. Somehow, David had become a partial controller of the family trust. She knew he forged something, but no one believed her. The signatures looked perfect, the dates matched, and the witnesses confirmed their authenticity. Every time she complained, David made her look like a bitter ex-wife trying to cause trouble. Now they were here to read the final version of the will. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Elena kept her eyes on the folder in the notary's hands. She remembered her father's last words before he died. "Never let wolves run the house, Elena." He had said it weakly, but his eyes were sharp. She knew exactly who he meant. "Court is now in session," said Judge Evelyn Hartman. "We're here for the final review of the Richard Parker estate and trust distribution." The notary began reading. His voice was dry and calm, moving through the legal words like water over stones. Then came the moment everyone waited for. As per the signed amendment dated June 4th, the trustee position and financial authority shall be shared equally between Elena Parker and David Hale. The room filled with murmurs. Elena's chest tightened. That was the date, June 4th. The same night her father's health had worsened. He could barely write his name at that point. There was no way he signed anything new that day. David smiled across the room. "Well," he said loudly, his tone half amused, "I suppose I'll take the lion's share after all." A few people laughed, thinking it was a joke. Even the notary gave a small, awkward chuckle. "As per Mr. Parker's signature, that seems correct," he said lightly. Elena didn't laugh. She just stared at David, her eyes cold. He thought she would cry or argue. He thought she'd break down like before. But not this time. Not after what she found. Last month, while cleaning out her father's study, she had discovered a small locked drawer under the desk. Inside was a USB stick labeled Midnight Conversation, June 4th. She had almost thrown it away, thinking it was an old recording. But something told her to watch it first. What she saw made her hands shake for days. Now, as David kept smirking, she reached into her purse and felt the small metal drive in her hand. It was warm from her touch, but it felt heavier than anything she'd ever held. That USB held the truth, proof of everything David had done. The judge looked at her. "Ms. Parker, is there anything you'd like to say before we proceed to the financial orders?" Elena stood up slowly. The room went silent. Everyone turned toward her. "Yes, Your Honor," she said softly. "There's something the court should see before this goes any further." David tilted his head, pretending to look curious. "More drama, Elena? You never disappoint." Elena ignored him. She stepped forward and placed the USB on the table. "This," she said, "is a recording from my father's study, dated the same night as the supposed amendment." The notary frowned. The judge leaned forward. "A recording?" "Yes, ma'am," Elena said. "My father had cameras in his office for security. This footage shows who really wrote those documents." For the first time, David's smile faded a little. He shifted in his seat. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. Anyone could fake a video." Judge Hartman raised a hand. "We'll determine that. Bailiff, connect the drive to the display system." The courtroom lights dimmed as the monitor flickered on. The first frame appeared, Richard Parker sitting at his desk, late at night. He looked weak but alert. The timestamp in the corner read June 4th, 11:58 p.m. David's face went pale. He leaned forward. Everyone watched as Richard spoke, his voice tired but firm. "David, I said no more signatures tonight. I'm not changing anything." Then came David's voice, calm but cold. "You're too tired, Richard. Let me help. Just sign this one, same as before." Elena felt her heart race. She remembered this part. The video showed David guiding her father's trembling hand toward a blank sheet of paper. Then, after Richard left the room to take his medicine, David opened his briefcase and pulled out a pre-signed document, her father's signature already on it from an old agreement. He slid it into the new folder, the same one filed after her father's death. The notary's face went white. The judge's eyes widened. David stood up suddenly. That's taken out of context," he shouted. But the room was already buzzing with shock. Reporters whispered, lawyers scribbled notes. The judge raised her gavel. "Enough," she said sharply. "We'll continue after verifying this recording. Until then, Mr. Hale, you are not to touch or transfer any estate property." David tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Lena finally exhaled. Her knees trembled slightly, but she stayed standing. For the first time in years, she felt her father's words echo inside her again. Not as a warning, but as strength. Never let wolves run the house. And today, the wolf had been cornered. But as the crowd began to clear, her family lawyer, Mr. Garrison, walked quietly to her side. His expression was strange, half proud, half troubled. "Lena," he whispered, "you did the right thing. But there's something you should know." She turned to him, still catching her breath. "What?" "There's another video," he said softly. "Same night. Your father recorded too." Elena's heart skipped. "Another video?" The courtroom noise faded behind her as she tried to process his words. The truth wasn't over yet. The first video had exposed David's crime. But what if the second one held something even deeper? She didn't know it yet, but that hidden file would change everything about her family's fortune and her father's final plan. Elena could still hear David's angry voice echoing in her head as she left the courtroom.
I just didn't know how to tell
you what really happened. The crowd
had
had been loud,
happened
reporters whispering and cameras flashing, but her focus was on one thing, the second video her lawyer had just mentioned. What could be on it? Why had her father recorded more than one video on that same night? She met Mr. Garrison later, that evening in his office. The lights were dim, and the smell of old books filled the air. He looked tired but calm. He placed a small envelope on his desk and pushed it toward her. Inside was another USB drive, labeled in her father's handwriting. For Elena, if the first isn't enough. Elena stared at it, her heart racing. "Did my father give this to you?" she asked. "Yes," Mr. Garrison said quietly. "He told me to keep it hidden unless something went wrong. I think this counts." Her hands shook as she took the USB. "What's on it?" "I don't know," the lawyer said. "He asked me not to watch it. He said it was meant only for your eyes." Elena swallowed hard. She didn't know if she was ready for more secrets. The first video had already turned her world upside down. Watching David manipulate her dying father had burned a hole in her heart. She wanted justice, but part of her still felt broken. Mr. Garrison placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Whatever it is, Elena, remember, your father trusted you more than anyone. He wanted you to have the truth." That night, Elena went home to her small apartment. The city lights glowed outside her window, but her room felt dark. She sat down at her desk, plugged in the second USB, and pressed play. The screen lit up with her father's face again. He looked tired but peaceful, sitting in his study with a glass of water beside him. "If you're watching this, Elena," Richard Parker said, "then you've already seen the other recording. You know what David tried to do." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She missed his voice so much. "But there's more you need to understand," he continued. "The trust David was after, the one with my signature, it isn't real. I created it as a test." Elena blinked. "A test," she whispered. "I suspected David might try to forge or manipulate documents after my death. So I made a decoy trust, a false one, with just enough truth to make it believable. What you fought over in court isn't the real inheritance." Elena covered her mouth in shock. "Oh my God! The true family trust," her father said, "was moved years ago under your mother's name before she passed. I made sure the funds and properties were safely stored under a different account, one only your brother knows about. Noah is the trustee now. When the time is right, he will show you everything." Elena froze. Noah? Her quiet, gentle brother who hated confrontation? He'd known all along? The video continued. "I wanted to teach you something, Elena. Strength isn't loud. It's patient. You've always been kind, but too trusting. I knew life would test you, and I wanted to make sure you learned how to stand alone, even when no one believed you. You've done that now. I'm proud of you." Her tears fell freely as her father smiled weakly at the camera. "Tell Noah it's time," he said softly. And tell him I kept my promise." Then the screen went black. Elena sat there for a long time, staring at her reflection on the dark monitor. Her chest felt heavy, but this time it wasn't pain. It was a strange mix of sadness and strength. Her father had planned everything. The false trust, the secret video, even her confrontation with David. It was all part of his final lesson. But now, another question burned in her mind. Why hadn't Noah told her? The next morning, she drove to Noah's house, a quiet cottage by the lake. He opened the door, surprised to see her. "Elena," he said, "what are you doing here?" "I was going to call after the hearing." She walked past him into the living room. "You knew," she said. Her voice shook. "You knew about the real trust." Noah sighed, closing the door. "I didn't know how to tell you. Dad made me promise to stay silent until you found out on your own." Elena stared at him, hurt and confused. "You watched me fight for 2 years, Noah. I thought I was going crazy. Everyone doubted me, and you said nothing." "I wanted to," he said softly. "But Dad was clear. He said you had to find your strength. He said if I told you too early, David would find a way to twist it again." She wanted to be angry, but when she looked into Noah's tired eyes, she saw the same pain she carried. He hadn't been her enemy. He'd been protecting her in silence. Noah sat down and opened a small wooden box from under the coffee table. Inside were several envelopes, a key, and a sealed document. He handed her one of the envelopes. "This is from Dad," he said. "It's the access code to the real trust. The money, the hotels, the accounts, they're all safe. He wanted us to rebuild everything in our names. Together." Elena ran her fingers over her father's handwriting. For the first time in years, she felt peace beginning to grow where anger had been. But there was still one thing left undone. David. The news was already spreading. David's lawyer had withdrawn from the case, and the judge had ordered an investigation into forgery and fraud. Still, part of Elena didn't trust that he'd stay quiet. David was clever, and she knew he wouldn't give up easily. That evening, she and Noah returned to the courthouse to hand over the second video as evidence. The judge watched it in silence, her face tightening as the truth unfolded. When it ended, she looked at Elena with respect. "Your father was a wise man," Judge Hartman said. "And you, Ms. Parker, you've done him proud." David was brought in later that night. His once smooth expression was gone, replaced by panic. When he saw Elena standing beside the judge, he tried to speak, but she didn't let him. "You took everything you could from me," she said quietly. "But you didn't take my father's trust, and you never will again." He didn't reply. The officers escorted him out in silence. As the courtroom emptied, Noah looked at his sister. "It's over now," he said. Elena nodded, wiping her tears. "No," she whispered. "It's just beginning." Because now, for the first time, she wasn't fighting for survival. She was fighting to honor the man who had taught her what real strength looked like. The midnight video had revealed more than betrayal. It had shown her the truth about herself. And as she left the courthouse hand in hand with her brother, she knew the real inheritance wasn't just money. It was the courage her father had left behind. The morning after the hearing, the city felt softer. Rain had washed the streets clean, and the air smelled like metal and soap. Elena drove with both hands tight on the wheel, the second USB safe in her purse and her father's last words steady in her mind. Noah sat beside her, quiet as always, but she could feel his attention on every turn she made. They were not running anymore. They were going to finish what their father started. They pulled up to a stone bank that looked like it had been there for 100 years. Inside, the lobby was cold and empty. A manager in a gray suit led them downstairs through a long hallway lined with numbered doors. The vault room hummed with the sound of old machines and new security. When the manager asked for identification, Noah handed over a small velvet pouch. From it, he took out a thin gold key and a card with their mother's name on it, Margaret Hale Parker, printed in faded ink. Elena's breath hitched. Their mother's handwriting curved like a ribbon along the bottom. She had died when Elena was young, but that careful loop in the letter G was still the same. It felt like a hand reaching through time to guide them forward. The manager unlocked a drawer and slid out a long metal box. He set it on the table and stepped back. "Take your time," he said softly and left. Noah looked at Elena. "Do you want to open it?" She nodded. Her hands were steady now. She slid the key in and lifted the lid. Inside were layers. On top lay a sealed envelope with her name. For Elena, when the wolves are quiet. Beneath it were documents tied with blue ribbon, a black notebook, and a small silver locket. Elena touched the locket first. It clicked open to a tiny photo, her mother laughing, sunlight on her face. On the other side, a single word was engraved, courage. She set it gently on the table and opened the envelope. Her father's voice seemed to rise from the paper as she read. He explained the structure of the real trust, the one hidden under their mother's name years ago. The properties were safe. The accounts were clean. The ownership of the hotels had been divided into voting shares that could not be sold or transferred by marriage or by guardianship. Every route David used was blocked before he ever tried. But there were conditions, simple, clear, and sharp as glass. Expose fraud publicly before accepting any benefit. Restore what was taken from employees or partners along the way. Name a purpose for the trust that outlives both Parker children. Elena read the lines again and again. It did not feel like a trap. It felt like a standard. Her father was not making her jump. He was showing her the shape of the person he believed she could be. Noah untied the blue ribbon and opened the black notebook. It was an audit. Every account, every property, every letter from a banker who tried to please David after the divorce. Each page had neat notes in their father's hand. Don't trust smooth explanations. Call twice. Save paper copies. There were also things that made Elena's stomach turn. Small transfers made during the time David helped. Each one routed through a shell company with an innocent name, Marbridge Associates. Not large enough to sound alarms. Just enough to test whether anyone was watching. At the bottom of the page, their father had written, "If this name appears, assume pressure or payment has been applied to someone inside." Marbridge, Noah said quietly. That's not David's usual shell. Elena flipped to the next page, where a set of initialed memos were taped. The same name appeared in the margins, Marbridge, next to a list of people paid for favors. A junior accountant, a clerk, and... Elena paused. "The notary," she whispered. There it was in black ink, a one-time consultation fee, the week before the amendment was signed. The note beside it was short, "Watch him. He's weak for easy money, strong for easy lies." Elena's chest tightened. She remembered his careful voice in the courtroom. The light laugh when David claimed the lion's share. It had seemed harmless, but there was confidence in it. The confidence of a man who thought the road was already paved. Noah tapped a paper tucked into the back of the notebook. It was a letter to Judge Hartman, sealed and stamped 2 months before their father died. The letter explained the decoy trust and named the notary as a possible risk if money started moving around him. "We should take this to her," Noah said. "Today." Elena nodded, but her eye caught something else, something that hadn't been sealed at all. A thin, flat case. Inside was a portable drive labeled in the same careful hand. "Office cam, study east wall, June 4th, full." "We watched the clip," she said, "but not the full recording." They found a small viewing station in the vault's side room and connected the drive. The hours unfolded on screen like a map of that last day. Her father meeting with his doctor, then falling asleep in his chair, then waking to drink water and write notes. The time stamp rolled forward. At 11:52 p.m., David entered with his smooth smile and expensive shoes. They watched the pressure, the guiding hand, the switching of papers. They watched the moment that had rocked the courtroom. But after that, there was more. 11:59 p.m. The study door opened again. The notary slipped inside, alone. He moved like someone returning to a scene he should avoid. He opened the desk drawer, checked the folders, then took a picture of the document with his phone. He whispered to himself, a single word that the microphone still caught. Marbridge. Elena and Noah stared at each other. The proof wasn't just what David did. It was who helped him. The notary wasn't a bystander. He was a link. "Elena," Noah said, "we have enough to break everything open." "Not yet," she said, surprising herself with the calm in her voice. "We verify every step, then we move. No mistakes. No excuses to call this a witch hunt." They spent the next hours building a clean chain. Copies of the drive, a printout of the ledger, a summary of transfers, and their father's sealed letter. When they climbed the vault stairs, the world outside had changed color. Late afternoon leaking into evening blue. The manager held the door and wished them good luck, as if he knew that truth needs a little blessing on its way out. On the sidewalk, Elena's phone buzzed. It was an alert from the court system, a motion filed by David's new attorney. He was asking to lift the freeze on certain assets for business continuity. He claimed funds were needed to pay staff and secure properties. It was a smart move. It sounded noble. If approved, he could move money again fast. He won't stop, Noah said. Neither will we, Elena answered. We meet the judge now. They drove straight to the courthouse. Judge Hartman was still in chambers. When her clerk saw the sealed letter with Richard Parker's signature and date, the door opened quickly. The judge read in silence. She watched the extended video clip twice, her jaw set. When she finished, she folded her hands. You did exactly what your father asked, she said to Elena. You found the truth and brought it clean. I will deny Mr. Hale's motion tonight and issue a wider freeze over any account touched by Marbridge Associates. We'll also unseal this evidence for the grand jury. Elena let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Noah's shoulders dropped. There is one more thing, the judge added, sliding the sealed letter back across the desk. Your father included something for you that I'm not permitted to read. He asked that you open it when the house is quiet. I believe he meant after the emergency passes. Elena nodded and slipped the letter into her purse. The judge stood and shook both their hands, her grip warm and firm. Outside the courthouse, the sky had turned dark. The city lights felt less sharp now. On the steps, Noah asked, Do you want to open it? Elena held the envelope in both hands. She could feel the weight of the paper, but also the weight of the moment, what they had already survived and what still waited. She thought of their mother's locket. Courage. Not here, she said. At the hotel by the lake, the old place Dad loved. If he left me a final message, I want to hear it where he was happy. They drove in silence along the water. The hotel stood like a memory. Stone edges, warm lamps in a few windows, and the soft sound of the dock ropes pulling against their posts. The night manager smiled and gave them a small key with a brass tag. Room 214, their parents' anniversary room. Inside, Elena set the envelope on the table. The lamp cast a gold circle around it. Noah sat on the bed but leaned forward, hands clasped. Elena broke the seal carefully. There was a single letter and, tucked behind it, a smaller, heavier card. She read the first line and felt her heart trip. If you're here, it means you stood your ground and the wolves have gone quiet. Good. Now you're ready for the last truth. She looked up at Noah, eyes shining. There's more, she whispered. Something Dad didn't tell us yet. She turned the smaller card over. On it, in their father's hand, was a name neither of them expected, and a message that would change how they understood the word inheritance forever. Elena held the smaller card from her father's envelope.
It took me a
The paper
long
was
time
thick,
to
the
realize
ink dark
that
and
the
careful.
ending is just
One
as
name was
important
written
as
in the middle,
beginning.
nothing else. Alden Hale. A storage locker number. A short address. And a line in her father's hand. The river that muddied your house does not start with David. Elena felt the floor tilt under her. Hale. Her mother's maiden name was Margaret Hale Parker. David's last name was Hale too. She looked at Noah. Do you know him? She asked. Noah shook his head. I've never heard Dad say that name. Elena could hear her own pulse. Then we find him, or what he left behind. They drove through the quiet town to a row of metal storage units by the river. The rain had stopped. Water ran in thin silver lines down the corrugated doors. The night manager checked their IDs, compared the locker number, and brought a clipboard. Elena showed him the card. He nodded once, as if he'd seen stranger things than families unlocking secrets, then led them to Unit 53. Inside, the light flickered on. The space was clean. No furniture, no trunks. Only two things stood in the middle: a slim fireproof cabinet and a banker's box marked in black marker, Marbridge. Elena's breath caught. She and Noah exchanged a look. The same name from their father's notebook, the same shadow that sat behind every bad document. Noah opened the box. Inside were folders, each one labeled with a different last name and a year. Some were thin. Some were swollen with copies of checks and emails. On top lay a small leather notebook. Elena opened it and read the first page. Marbridge Holdings, established by Alden Hale as a family office to advise relatives on estate matters. Strategy: ingratiate, introduce, help. Secure signatures, move small amounts first, test resistance, if none, go bigger. Primary tool: favors to weak links, clerks, notaries, junior staff. Key asset: David, smart, charming, ambitious, keep him close. Elena swallowed hard. The handwriting was older but steady. She flipped forward. There were notes about lunches, visits, quiet payments, and practice wills. A list of notaries who liked quick money. At the bottom of one page, a sentence underlined twice. Richard Parker is stubborn. David will need a personal route, marriage. Elena stared at the line until the words blurred. Noah touched her shoulder. They targeted you, he said, voice low. From the start. She opened the fireproof cabinet next. Inside were labeled drives. One said, Parker, study east wall, full night. Another, notary, retainer. Another, Alden plus David contract. Recordings, Noah whispered. He recorded everything. They took the drives and the notebook back to the hotel room and connected the first one. The video showed a restaurant booth. Alden Hale sat across from David. Alden was older, with the same sharp cheekbones Elena remembered from her mother's photos. Alden, you want the Parker money? Then you marry the Parker girl. Smile. Be helpful. She'll trust you. David, and if Richard blocks me? Alden, then we change the paper trail. The old man likes neat signatures. We'll give him neat signatures. Elena felt a cold ache in her chest, anger, shame, and a dark, rising relief that the pattern finally had a face. This didn't start with a random bad man who became her husband. It started with a cousin on her mother's side, a hidden branch of family that had decided her life was a door they could walk through. Noah cued the next recording. The notary appeared, settling into a chair in a small office, his voice hushed. Notary. I'll certify identical pages if the signature matches. One fee clean quick. Alden, off camera, and you won't ask where the first signature came from. Notary, not my business. The room felt tighter. Elena pressed her palms into her thighs until the heat calmed her. She pictured her father alone in his study, guessing at the shapes moving around him, but refusing to bow. The man had fought with paper and patience. Now she would fight the same way. They drove straight to the courthouse at sunrise, a blue-gray hour when even the city seemed to whisper. The clerk called Judge Hartman. Within minutes she had them in chambers. Elena set the notebook on the desk, then the drives, then the Marbridge box. She spoke simply, like her father would have, just facts, no flames. The judge listened without moving, her eyes steady. She watched one clip, Alden and David, and didn't blink. When it ended, she leaned back. This changes the scope, she said. We are not looking at a single forgery. We are looking at a scheme. She issued orders quickly. A search warrant for Alden Hale's offices and home, a subpoena for the notary's records, and an extended freeze on any account tied to Marbridge. She also signed an instruction to alert prosecutors in 2 other states. Patterns like this travel, she said. We don't let them travel far. By noon, the news broke. Reporters gathered on the courthouse steps. David was brought in again, now in a wrinkled suit, his charm drained away. He saw the box with Marbridge and went very still, like a man who finally sees the edge of his own road. Elena, he said hoarsely, you don't understand. Alden, I understand exactly, she said, calm as stone. You made your choices. So did he. In the afternoon hearing, David's attorney asked for mercy. He said his client was a pawn. Judge Hartman looked at the video again, the contract in which David accepted a cut. A willing pawn is a partner, she said, and denied every request. Then the judge turned to Elena and Noah. About your father's conditions, she said. You have exposed the fraud publicly. There is one more step, restoring what was taken. Elena nodded. We started a list last night, she said, sliding over a spreadsheet. Employees pushed out during the efficiency phase, vendors who were underpaid and partners who were cornered. We'll call every name. The judge's expression softened almost into a smile. That will be the best line in this entire file, she said. Not the gavel. The calls. 2 days later, federal agents arrested Alden Hale, leaving a stone townhouse 3 cities away. The photo ran everywhere, a proud older man forced to lower his chin. The notary resigned and turned witness, confirming the retainer payments. David, terrified of spending his best years in prison, cooperated and handed over his private messages. The Marbridge ring began to fold. At dusk, Elena and Noah returned to the Lake Hotel to breathe. They stood on the dock where the water looked like poured steel. Elena held their mother's locket between her fingers and said, Courage, the way you say a small prayer to steady the day. What are we going to do with it all? Noah asked, meaning the hotels, the accounts, the weight and gift of the Parker name. Elena thought of her father's 3 conditions. She thought of the words in the trust. Name a purpose that outlives both Parker children. The answer felt simple now. Clean like truth under clear water. We keep what keeps people safe, she said. We sell what feeds the wolves. And we build something that can't be forged. They created the Parker Foundation for Honest Work, a fund for employees and small partners targeted by advisors who promise shortcuts. The first grants went to 2 vendors David had squeezed and to the junior accountant who'd refused a Marbridge gift and lost her job for it. Elena invited her to lunch and said, "You were brave first. We were just brave on time." When the first checks cleared, Elena opened her father's letter again and read the final paragraph out loud on the dock. "Inheritance is not what you hold. It's what you let stand when you're gone. Let truth stand, Elena." She slipped the locket's chain over her neck. The metal felt warm from her palm, then cool against her skin. She looked at Noah. "We should sign the foundation papers in both our names," she said. "Equal votes. If I ever forget what this is for, you remind me." He smiled, small and sure. "If I forget, you remind me." They stood there until the lamps blinked on along the shore and the water turned from steel to ink. Behind them, the hotel windows glowed. In front of them, the lake breathed in slow rings. Elena thought of the wolves, how loud they had seemed, how sharp their teeth, how certain their stride. And then how quiet they became when shown a mirror and a light. The case would take months. There would be more hearings, more papers to sign, more statements to give. But the shape of the ending was already clear. The men who traded lies like currency would answer for them. The people who were owed would be paid. And the Parker name would mean what Richard intended, not power, proof. Proof that some houses hold. Elena took Noah's hand. "We're done letting other people write our pages," she said. He squeezed back. "Then let's write the next one right."